Mark, this is great to have you here. You know, I had your brother here and just talked about just the intensity of you guys growing up in the Boston area and being in Massachusetts. It's so exciting. You have been the MD for Britney for many, many years. And you're doing this here playing at a high level, playing keyboard, playing these shows. It's an incredible excitement that you have when you're performing. But you've made this happen for many, many years and you're still going strong. This is powerful. Where did it begin for you?
I'm a third-generation musician on my dad's side. My dad was a drummer. He was a big band drummer, Louis Bellson, you know, Buddy Rich, those were his heroes.
Amazing.
And I can remember, you know, from the earliest time, 4 or 5 years old, me and my brother. He's 14 months older, so we're like Irish twins, really, you know. And I used to remember my dad's band rehearsing in the basement, and they used to play like Chicago, like all like the old Chicago stuff. He had a full horn section. It was like a 13-piece band.
Wow.
And I think through osmosis and just being in that environment, it wasn't forced on us, but we used to like sneak downstairs and listen, and you know, it was our bedtime. 7, 8 o'clock when you're 4 or 5 years old. Your mother wants you in bed so she can take a break for the night. And we used to sneak down in the basement and watch the band, and when the band would leave, we'd wait for our parents to go to bed. We'd walk downstairs and we'd turn everything on to the best that we knew how to.
Yeah.
And we'd start playing instruments, and you know, I remember I was fascinated by just the sound of like the keyboards, and I think the keyboard player at the time had a Yamaha CS80, which nowadays these things are going for $30,000, $40,000. And we had access to these instruments, and I remember just getting, I didn't know at the time what it was doing to me, but the hair on the back of my neck would stand up. I would walk over to the CS80 and play a sound, and it really stuck with me. And just being in that environment and having my brother kind of like, oh, well, he's on the drums, let me go to the bass. Let me go to the guitar, and then eventually I migrated towards the, I think it was an organ. They had an old Hammond organ in the basement, and I used to turn it on, and it used to take 20 minutes for it to warm up in the tubes, and then my brother and I just started playing with each other different instruments, and then we kind of settled. He settled more into like, I think the drums was where he went, because that's what my dad played.
Yeah.
And then we both had sticks in our hands when we were infants, so we had the rhythmical, you know, attributes to be able to.
What a beautiful, smart thing for your parents to give you the access to all these instruments, but to start with drums, that rhythmical sense first.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That was something that I think, you know, I mean, you can just sit down and play, and even if you're not someone who has any type of like a coordination, you can still make sounds, and but we had the natural ability to just keep a beat and play, and you know, at 4 and 5 years old, you don't really know what you're doing, but you know you're doing something right.
That's right.
So we just kind of stayed on that path, and I've always had my brother to lean on in terms of, you know, what direction he was going in, so I would go in that direction, and I would see him and how he would take lessons, and I think formally my parents started giving me lessons around 8 years old. And it was
strict piano lessons? Was this?
Yeah, it was, you know, strictly piano. I had a really good ear. I remember hearing Scenes from an Italian Restaurant. And I walked up and I started to play the melody.
Yeah.
And my dad looked and said, okay, something's going on here. Let's see if we can exploit it a little. And it wasn't pushed, it was nurtured. It was a nurturing environment. They saw us going towards these instruments, and you want some lessons? Well, I want a mini Moog. Well, you should start here first, learn the piano, and then if you get better and you want to stick with it, then I'll get you a Moog and I'll get you this. And because that was like when synthesizers were really first starting to become more like, you know, evident in music.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that I was born at a time when it was still early with the development of synthesizers, you know.
Even of gear, you mentioned tube amplifiers, and I remember that for sure when I started out, and you had to kind of wait for the amp to warm up. And sometimes if you blew a tube out, it changed the sound of your amp. You had to concern yourself now where gear is at. It's a whole different world.
Whole different world. I mean, I have a couple of vintage analog synths that I use on stage. So old Roland like SH-101 I have an Oberheim OB8. And I tell my tech, you got to leave it on all day because it's going to sound the way I need it to at showtime. And I remember I've done the David Letterman show a few times, and you know, Paul Schaefer has an OB8, and there's a sign on the keyboard that says, "Do not turn off or you'll be fired." And the keyboard was literally on for 40 years. They never shut the keyboard off, and it sounds great when it's
held
fully,
up.
Yeah, held up.
That's amazing. So here you are now, you're taking lessons. When did you start playing musically together with your brother or friends? Or
Well, it was really at that age, 6, 7 years old, and we both played hockey, and we met someone from the town that we lived in, and our parents became very close, and their son was a drummer. So it was like the power trio vibe, where I was playing piano and like keyboard, organ, my brother was playing bass and guitar, and Jeff, our friend, would play drums. So we started writing songs around 8, 9, 10 years old, and developing these songs, and we just kind of had that ability to write a verse, a chorus, a bridge. So we would put these songs together, and I think the first song that we wrote was a song called "Cops Can't Stop Chasing You." At 9 years old, the cops aren't chasing you, but that's what we wrote, and we kind of exploited that type of songwriting ability. And I was learning all this stuff before I really knew a lot about harmony and like chord structures. Right. It wasn't until much later in my late teens that I actually started to learn like the Bill Evans stuff, and was listening to a lot of Miles Davis at an early age because my dad had all those records. My mother was a big R&B fan. Huge. So Earth, Wind and Fire and things like that, and just kind of meshed into,
Huge. Think about the music you're talking about right now. And this is what I love that the people that are watching this get a chance to hear. Yeah. The influence. You're playing with Britney now, which, think about the influence that you have. You're talking Miles, you're talking Earth, Wind and Fire. Yeah. That's a whole different, but look at what that gave you.
Absolutely.
As a foundation to do what you're doing now and to lead you to even many other things, who knows?
Yeah, I think it's important to round yourself musically. I see, a lot of people have their taste and what they like, and to go outside of that comfort zone and to listen to things that you may not have thought about before, I think it's important. It rounds you,
Beautiful. So when you were taking lessons, were you working at a specific piano books? Were there piano teachers that you had that influenced you, that guided you, that inspired you?
I worked with a guy named Al Vega out of Everett, Mass, and he was like a Boston kind of hero, legend, played with everyone that came in. And my dad, being in the music industry, the local industry, knew a lot of the keyboard players and the guys that were on that next level, being like hardcore bebop players. Right. And I started with him, and I studied with him for about 4 years. And then because of scheduling changes, not being able to make the drive, I went through a series of many teachers that some I loved, some I didn't like so much, some that forced me to do more like of a Chopin, Bach. But having the airs and like sort of a natural swing, I was migrating more towards like jazz and R&B music and things like that. So reading music, I really wasn't interested. I just wanted to play. Yeah. And I could play. I could play like, whatever Billy Joel songs. That was probably the biggest inspiration for me to start playing piano. How wonderful. Was listening to his stuff, and of course Liberty DeVito, and watching him play, and with the veracity that he played. So, it's I was exposed to a lot of music early on, and then I started to make my decision, as I got into high school, Yes, and Rick Wakeman, Keith Emerson, Patrick Moraz, these guys really started to show me what you could do with the synthesizer and beyond just playing piano and electric piano, Rhodes and Hammond.
So you really kind of, you seeked out this knowledge. It wasn't like it was just handed to you.
No.
You had that drive to want to go out and learn this stuff.
Absolutely.
So you could grow more. That's pretty powerful. So now you're playing in these bands and you're starting to grow. Where did your professional career start to hit into motion here?
Well, I mean, technically, I think the first gig that I got paid for, I might have been 12 or 13 with my brother, of course, because I've been playing with him my whole life. There really hasn't been a lot of musical situations that I've been in where my brother hasn't been there next to me.
What a beautiful thing. I have 2 older brothers and a younger sister that also played music, and we played in a band together for many, many years. And the feeling of us playing and the harmonies we all had, and of course the uniqueness that we had as a family, is such a wonderful memory. That you have that with your brother. This is beautiful.
Yeah, and we played, I think it was like a political fundraiser or something of that sort, and we got up and played like a 2-hour set. There was a DJ there and everything, but we got up and we played, and it was a gig that my dad set up for us. So, there was no pressure, but we went from like Pat Metheny's Phase Dance into like Highway Star by Deep Purple. So we were playing whatever we knew, so we ran the gamut. And that was like the first gig that I actually got paid for, a couple of bucks or whatever it was. And you know, throughout high school, I used to sneak into clubs and play in bands. My brother and I, we used to sneak into clubs and you know, play, do a 45-minute set, and then get out before anyone knew that we were even there. But I think professionally, it was when I was in college, I started to do like the wedding circuit and play with different, you know, what they call GB bands, you know, like a general business
club
band.
dates and casuals, as they call
things
them.
Things like that, you know, solo piano gigs for like, you know, like weddings and then doing a lot of functions and weddings and bar mitzvahs, whatever gig I could get my hand on.
Playing all different types of music.
All different kinds.
Ethnic music, different dance kind
polkas.
of music.
I played in a polka band, and you know, it
Yeah.
wasn't my cup of tea, but I said, hey, you know, it's $30. I got to fill my tank up to get to school tomorrow, so let me go do a polka gig. You know, it's like you take whatever you can. You know.
But what a wonderful open mind that was to do that. I mean, I can remember playing gigs that were just, you know, with accordion players and Italian songs and all the different ethnic songs, and that really has helped me even now.
Yeah.
So that's something which you guys did, which is so great to hear. So the fact that playing with your brother in these dates must have been just fun. Here you're traveling together and doing it.
Yeah, and it was like, you know, for me at that time in my life, being like in my late teens, it was kind of like a crutch. I didn't know it at the time, but I relied on him so much that I wasn't really, you know, I could have broken out a lot earlier as an individual musician, but I had him to lean on and to, you know, basically to inspire me every note that he played. Yeah. And even to this day, he still is the best musician that I know. I mean, and I'm not saying that to give him to, you know, Greg, I'm not trying to toot his own horn or anything, but I play with a lot of people and never ever got that feeling. On a musician standpoint, he's my brother, we're very close, we're Irish twins, but to have that sound and that drive and that, you know, rhythmical structure that he always had, you know, was a really good learning experience for me.
But there's a certain magic with that, you know, and I speak about the Italian heritage of how Italian families are, the close to an Italian family. Then you speak about having music in your family, which is extremely important that you had that always in your life. Then, you know, the thickness of blood when you're playing with your brother, you know, there's a certain telepathy that you can just think of something and you know he's going to get. And I had that with my family. I just know that, you know, I can even be thinking of a song next I want to play, and it's kind of like I'll throw it out to the universe, and all of a sudden they call the song. You know, so there's something that's much deeper there, which is incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now here you are playing now. So you came out to Vegas, I understand, and you guys came out to play with a lounge band.
Yeah, he's 14 months older. He entered Berklee. I was still in high school, and my sophomore year into I think it was my junior year. The summer going into my junior year, I got hooked up with the piano teacher and entered Berklee when I graduated. I took a year off, practiced, I shed like it was the 8 hours a day, pulled the blinds down, no life, no girlfriend, no friends, you know, I had a job. And he graduated, so when he graduated from Berklee, at that time of my life, being so reliant on him for support, I felt like a fish out of water. And I took a leave of absence from Berklee. I did 3 years. I said, my brain's going to explode. You can't possibly learn 40 years of information in 4 years. Took a break, started playing a lot, and my brother was working in a band, and the singer was from Reno. And she said, I have an agency that wants to book me in Vegas. Would you help me put a band together? Of course I'll put a band together. He called me. Of course I didn't want to go. I didn't want to leave the nest, the parents, the support. I was about 22 at the time. And he coaxed me. He's like, oh, it's just a month. We're going to go to Bally's. We're going to play for a month at Bally's. Money, tax-free, you know, no state income tax. I said, okay, I'll do it. Very apprehensively. And I came out here and fell in love with being able to play. I mean, what other place was offering me to play 6 nights a week, 6 hours a night?
How great.
It was great.
And you're playing songs, a variety of songs that they are, and you were playing all different types of songs. And were you guys writing any original stuff? Did you have it?
Yeah, we were playing, I mean, we were very brazen at that age, because now looking back now, I said to myself, what was I thinking? But we would open our sets with an original, like jazz kind of fusion rock type of piece to get the people in. Okay, the band's playing, so that was our way of bringing people in, and then we would hit them with whatever the singer would call.
At that time.
Yeah, exactly.
How long were you in Vegas for?
It was supposed to be a month, and it turned into 2 years.
What year was that? What year?
We're talking about 92 to about 95-ish, somewhere in there.
What was Vegas like then when you got out here?
It was a completely different animal than it is now. There was a lot of live music. There really wasn't any DJs. you know.
At all, yeah.
Yeah, I believe there was, you know, like the Dunes was still here, the Sands was still here, the Desert Inn was still up.
Yeah.
So it was more of the old Vegas, you know, style.
Yeah,
and, you know, being in my early 20s, you kind of, you know a lot about the Vegas history and, like, you know, the whatever happens here and, like, the gambling. I'm not a gambler, thankfully enough.
Good for you.
So it was a lot more open. It wasn't as crowded as it is now. It's very, like, there's a lot more people who come in here now than, you know, back then. It was very low key.
Yeah.
There was no people movers, and there was no escalators. It was used across the boulevard, and there's no, you know, bridges going over. And it was a good time.
Well, it's amazing to experience. I was here and I played here in 1976.
Wow.
And you'd ride down the strip and you'd see the Sands, Frank Sinatra. You'd see Sammy Davis Jr., Dean Martin, and all these. And we just couldn't believe it. We were playing in the lounge, and it was just amazing to experience that history. So you were able to capture the tail part of that.
Yeah, the tail end.
For the change of what Vegas is now.
Exactly.
Vegas now is a corporate machine that is powerful for what it is. But the fact that you're here, and you got to understand, you're here. We've interviewed guys from Elton's band. Elton John's here. You've got Cher here. You've got Jennifer Lopez. You've got Britney Spears. There's an energy here that still continues in the Vegas mentality of what this city's about.
And I think that's where it's heading now. I think for many years, you know, they got hit bad by the recession in 08. Yeah. And, you know, a lot of people lost their jobs. And I think the music industry here took a hit. Yeah. And, you know, I came in through the back door of Vegas. I mean, I've been working with an artist for 17 years who just happened to say, well, I'm going to do a Vegas residency. It wasn't like I've been here for 20 years trying to make it and, like, the grind.
Right, right.
So, you know, it's definitely changing. I see more A-list artists who are coming into town. Right. When we first came here, you know, almost 4 years ago, there wasn't a lot of A-list artists in the city. You had, you know, Celine has been here for 10 years, and I think a lot of people wanted to see what the show was going to do in terms of, like, Britney, and it was hugely successful. It was supposed to be 2 years. Now it's going to be 4 years. She signed an extension. And a lot of people early on, I remember seeing, okay, well, Jennifer Lopez is in the crowd tonight. This one's in the crowd. Lionel Richie's in the crowd. They wanted to see what the hype was about. Yeah. And you know, shortly thereafter, Jennifer Lopez signed a contract to do a residency. So I think you're going to start to see a lot more people, you know, coming in here, because the cost of touring nowadays is highly expensive. And it's just an easy fit for some artists, you know, to be able to come here.
Absolutely. And Vegas. Vegas is Vegas.
Yeah,
this
of course.
Is in the middle of nowhere in the desert. You know, they built this incredible excitement of what it is about, and people know about Vegas world, no matter where I go around the world.
Yeah.
When you mention Vegas, people light up. Nevertheless, does the city light up? Sure. So you're here for this time, so then you're going to be traveling with it. You're designing, as a musical director now, you've got a whole other level of responsibility. Were you prepared for that as a musical director in your life of growing up as a musician?
You know, I don't know if anything can prepare you for that. Yeah. I think, you know, I've had a lot of good situations where I've learned how to deal with celebrity. Right. I was a ball boy for the Celtics for many years during the Bird era. Wow. And that, I think, having that experience made me calm to be around famous people, if I can put it so, you know, put it like that. Yeah, yeah. But if you don't challenge yourself and kind of step outside of your comfort zone, you won't know if you.
That's a great line.
You can do it.
That's a great line. If you don't challenge yourself and step out of your comfort zone, you don't know if you can do it.
Exactly.
That's a powerful line. So you're doing this now. All of a sudden you're here, and your technician. How'd you get into the keyboard part of it?
I was basically like a programmer, and after the rehearsal phase, before the show went on the road, at the time the front of house engineer said, "Well, you need to come on the road with us now, and to maintain what you did." I said, okay, you know, I didn't really have a lot going on at that time that would have kept me in Boston. So I went, and it was like a 4 or 5 month run of the States, A markets and B markets. And I, you know, would set up the keyboards every day. I would break them down. Having never done this except for myself, certainly not on a big major tour like that with, you know, 16 trucks at the time and, you know, 100 people working on the show. And you know, it was a little bit hard at first because the two keyboard players knew who I was, but they were like looking at each other like, which one of us is leaving? Like, we know something? And I said, no, I'm here just to help you guys and, you know, be a tech. And So it was the best thing that I did for myself as a musician.
Did you have any relationship with Britney at that time? Were you talking?
No. It's like, I came in, I got hired by a guy from Boston. A lot of the people that originally put her first show together, they were all Boston-based. Wow. So I originally started off as a keyboard tech and then worked my way into the whole world of like playback, which is very predominant now in the world of music. A four-piece band, it would be almost impossible for a four-piece band to replicate, like a record nowadays.
Yeah, exactly.
So you use a lot of supplemental tracks and different percussive things. And someone said, well, now you have to run all the track stuff. I said, well, what is? I had no idea what that was. So I went from being a keyboard tech, being scared to originally take it, saying, okay, I can do this.
Nice.
It's not that bad. Now they want me to do this other job, which I have no idea how to do. But at the time, thankfully, there was two guys who had set it up, so it was kind of idiot-proof.
Okay.
So all I had to do was just kind of take it over and maintain it. So I went from being a keyboard tech to being now like the playback guy. And that was a challenge because, I'm a player.
Yeah.
And I'm not, I did study technology at Berkeley. That was my backup plan. If I can't make a living as a musician, I still want to do something musically related, so maybe I'll get into all this stuff called Pro Tools, like it had just come out.
Nice.
So I got myself immersed in that aspect, and I think people started to see that I could do more than just what I was doing, so they kept throwing me more responsibilities, because you can be really good at what you do, but if you don't play well in the sandbox with other people, you're not going to work.
Right. That's a very big part of the family atmosphere that happens on tour with a band, whether you're traveling in a bus together or just playing on stage together. There's got to be that respect for the personalities of everyone around.
Yeah, everyone's different. You're not going to get along with everyone. I've been on tour buses with 13 people. And you are roommates with these, and like you don't choose who you get to be on a bus with. They basically tell you. So you're traveling around the world, around the country, on airplanes, on tour buses. So you have to be able to get along with people.
Absolutely.
And I've seen a lot of people fight and, oh yeah, what happened to so-and-so? Oh, well, they couldn't get along, so we had to let them go.
Yeah, it's as simple as that.
Simple as that.
So I want, as people listen to this, I want them to know, so now how'd you get to keyboard and how'd you get to MD?
I don't think it was until the circus tour in 2008 that I actually started playing keyboards, because the stage was in the round. It was literally a 3-ring circus.
Yeah.
And the tour manager at the time said, there's nowhere to hide you under the stage. There's no real estate, so you're going to play keyboards too. And I said, okay, great. I don't need to, but if you need me to play keyboards and run all the playback stuff, I can do both jobs.
What a team player. Good for you.
So I did both jobs. Usually on a big tour like that, you have a guy that just does all the playback stuff and a guy that just plays keyboards.
Right.
But I could do both. So I said, I'll do both. I did both, and I was the co-MD. They had Simon Ellis was the musical director. He's an English guy who was working with the Spice Girls at the time. And he got the call to come in and arrange all the music, because Britney doesn't like to do the songs just like the record. She wants to add dance breakdowns. So he came in to do that, arrange it, gave me all the work, and then I had to shape the songs to fit in a timeline for all the time code aspects of a show. Because now everything is lights and automation, pyro. I press one button and it starts the whole show. It starts the lights, the video. So I got into learning about time code and SMPTE and generating time code to 5 different departments that needed. And people knew that I could play, but I wasn't one of these guys that got up on stage and would try to blow chops and everything. I knew what my role was. Right. This is what I'm doing. I don't need to get up there and blow chops on someone or try to steal someone's gig, much like we were talking about before.
Absolutely, but what great humility you had. That's a wonderful quality to have.
I remember being in the back of a truck in Mexico City during a monsoon, loading a truck. It was the last show that we did. I think it was Dream Within a Dream Tour 2003. And there was no lights, but I'm physically putting cases in the back of a truck saying, what am I doing? I went to Berkeley, I studied music, I wanted to be Billy Joel. Why am I loading cases into a truck? But I didn't know at the time that was where I had to go to get to where I am now.
Powerful, very, very powerful. And that's the message of what we have sometimes in life. Sometimes you just believe so much in yourself that you know that there's a reason for what I'm doing at the point. So now you end up getting the job as MD. And
yeah, it was shortly after the circus tour. She did the Femme Fatale tour,
Right.
and I was the co-MD on that with Simon. And that show was very different because originally the concept was to not have a band.
Right.
So I said, oh, okay, you're just going to have me under the stage playing some keyboard parts to fill in the time in between songs, to give her time to change, and I'll run the playback stuff. Great. And then we sat down, we had a conversation. What do you want to do for a band? Do you want a band? Do you not want a band? Is it the show's going to be that there's like a budget where you can't afford to have a band? What's the deal?
Right.
Well, I want to have some kind of aspect. And so we came up with a concept of like a Daft Punk type of vibe,
Right.
where we had two keyboard players, me and Simon Ellis, and I played electronic percussion, I played synth bass, and I played keyboards and ran all the playback stuff. And Simon, who did all the arranging, kind of just, he played on top of what he had already done.
Right.
So, and it's a parts gig. You know, when you play the song Slave, you have to play the part. If you play something different with a different sound, it's not Slave.
Not Slave.
And then she turns around, she gets a little bit upset.
Yeah.
So you got to give the artist what she wants.
Right.
So I did that tour. That tour lasted about 19 months. And there was a little bit of a break, and then I got the call that, okay, Britney's doing a residency, and we want you to be the musical director. I said, okay, great. You know, what's the deal? What's going to happen? And they basically told me, I said, okay, 2 years, I don't have to worry about work. Great, you know. And I came in and worked with an arranger called Natural, who did all the arranging for the show, because my role at that time is still doing all the time code stuff, trying to organize all the music into a timeline. How are the songs, they're going to flow into each other? When are you going to talk? When are you going to dance? When do you want dance breaks? So to have someone like Natural do all the arrangements with Baz Halpin, who put the show together, it took a lot off my plate. Right. So I could more or less tend to her and her needs and what she wants. You know, I was able to hire the band. This is the first time that I've actually been given the go-ahead to hire the musicians. Right. So it was a no-brainer when I got that call. I knew the first call I was going to make was to my brother.
Right.
That was a no-brainer, you know.
Beautiful.
So that was really when I got the official title of MD was about 3 years ago.
That's beautiful.
Where it was just me by myself to kind of be the guy to worry about whatever note comes out of the PA.
When did Johan join the band?
Johan joined the band this year. Mm-hmm. We had an original drummer who, we had a scheduling conflict. He wasn't able to do the show anymore. So I said, I got the guy. And originally, I would have liked to have hired Johan, but immigration, visas, you know, there's all...
He had a challenge from Sweden, absolutely,
you know, there's all kinds of red tape that I don't want to put a management company through.
Right.
So we went with another guy who was from Boston, and like I said, scheduling didn't work out, so I called Johan and I said, you know, I have an opening. Would you be available to do it? So he said, absolutely. So I gave him the music like 4 months before he played the first note. I said, here's the show, learn it verbatim. We'll do some rehearsals at my warehouse in Vegas. And we came and did 6 days of rehearsals. I knew that I could have called him and just had him come on stage. Because he actually did fill in for our drummer on the circus tour who lost his mother. He had to fly back to England. And Johan came in, did 2 shows with us, Detroit and Chicago, no rehearsals, gave him the music, learned it, came in and played it. Because that's where I come from, see at the gig.
Yeah.
You know, here's the music, see at the gig.
Yeah.
Don't need to rehearse for 6 months to do the show. Let it ferment as we go.
Great.
You know?
So here you are now, you've got guys around you that you enjoy, that you know that you're comfortable with. You MD this, you're in Vegas, you're going to go to Asia soon. This really is an amazing dream that you have accomplished in this journey of music.
Sure.
And it's not over yet. You're on fire now with what you're doing in the process of what it is. In closing, if we had to think about these young musicians watching this, and they really want to be in your position, they really want to do what you're doing, what would you say to them that would give them the desire and the hope and the tools to live their passion in music?
The best advice that I think is always have a fallback plan. You know, have something to fall back on. It's a tough industry. It's only getting more difficult, you know, with downloading of music. The record labels aren't really making much money.
Right.
And if you look at the slope and the downward spiral of the music industry in terms of sales, live music is really where it's going.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's going to be a lot of hard knocks and speed bumps. A lot of people are going to tell you, nah, it's a bad life. You know, my senior year in high school, 2 weeks before I was going to graduate high school, I get a call from my guidance counselor. Yeah, come down. I want to talk to you about your future. So I said, okay. So I go, never have once talked to this guy in 4 years. I go down. So what are your plans for post Linfield High School? I said, well, I'm going to go to Berkeley. I'm going to study music synthesis, and I'm going to minor in jazz composition. That's the worst idea I've ever heard in the 30 years that I've been teaching. I would highly recommend that you don't do that and go study culinary arts like you said you were going to do. I said, well, thank you very much. I'm going to do what I'm going to do.
Yeah, right.
And that basically led a series of negativity from people. If it was friends, parents, or what are you doing? Music. Why don't you be a lawyer? Your dad was a politician as well as a drummer. Why don't you do something like that? So everyone in the world is going to tell you why you shouldn't do it.
Right.
And why you should do something else because there's no money in it. You know, Thelonious Monk said, do what you want, play what you want, the money will come later,
Absolutely.
and people will catch on later, right?
Absolutely.
So that's kind of like the philosophy that I've had a lot of down times, a lot of like, you know, times where I said, I can't do it, I gotta get out of it, you know, I gotta figure out something else. But you just gotta kind of stick with it and persevere and stay true to what you really wanna do. Don't let anybody try to sway you into something else. If it falls in your lap, that's great, you know, and always step outside of your comfort zone, you know. I wasn't really a very good sight reader, but I forced myself to go play in churches, to go play with vocal groups, to strengthen that type of aspect of what I felt was not as good.
Yeah.
So you just got to really stick with it and stay true to your heart.
With that perseverance and that entire path that you're on right now is absolutely beautiful. And that's what everybody needs to hear. Listen, you're inspiring hundreds of thousands to millions of people from what you're doing, from that little spot on that stage. You're reaching the world with your music. This is powerful to think that from Boston in your little area. Go back to that guidance counsel and make sure you let him know what you're doing right now.
Oh, I have, believe me. Well, this is why I enjoy doing this so much, and to try to educate younger people, because you know, I go to where I got the support.
Yeah.
So I've gone to many different high schools in the neighborhood. I haven't gone to my high school yet, but I try to preach and let the younger generation know that it's a tough road, it's a tough racket being in the music industry, but it's very rewarding once you get over that hurdle and once you get into a place where you're like, I'm making a living, I'm paying my bills, and I can take trips, and I have off time, and I have a lot of faith and respect from the person that I work for. And that is the most important thing for me. I don't need to get paid a lot of money. If I get a thank you at the end of a show, that's all I need.
Good for you. You know, following your passion and following what you love, what your heart says, is never easy, but you're doing it well. Boy, keep it going. Thank you so much on behalf of the Sessions, Mark.
It's a pleasure.
Mark with a C. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.